Attorney General Pam Bondi just did it again. She completely undercut and undermined Donald Trump's talking point that when it comes to the Epstein scandal, that he's desperately trying to shove back into Pandora's box by saying, this is boring. There's nothing to see here. I don't know why you are all interested in this. She completely undercut his position in a new filing in federal court in the Southern District of New York, where she tells a federal judge, as she tries to get the grand jury transcripts released, that this case is of great public interest and importance, and it demands the release of files. I couldn't agree with you more, Pam Bondi, although that completely wraps you around your own axle about arguing to the American people that the full Epstein files should not come out, while you shoot your client if in the head, if not the foot. I'm Michael Popok. You're on Legal AF YouTube. This is Friday morning. Let's get to the Epstein report because it's that important. I got the new filing right here. I will post it on Legal AF Substack. What is this all about? Well, if you recall, to try to tamp down the public interest, as Pam Bondi puts it in her own filing, around Epstein, self-created, I would suggest, by Donald Trump himself, they went and said, well, we'll redefine what the Epstein files are. We won't call them the truckload, Pam Bondi's phrase, of documents reviewed and scoured for hours and hours and months by the FBI in order for Pam Bondi to brief her client and her boss, Donald Trump, about his name being all over the Epstein files. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, no. To the Trump administration, that's not the Epstein files. The Epstein files are the grand jury transcripts of the Epstein and Maxwell grand juries from several years ago. Really? Because even now they have to admit that there's basically nothing of novel interest in those files, in those grand jury proceedings. Because get this, have a seat, only 2 witnesses, and they were both law enforcement, testified combined at the Epstein and Maxwell grand juries. That's it. An FBI agent and a New York police officer detective working on a human trafficking task force, summarizing the evidence in front of the grand jury. No victims, no patrons, no people who participated in the child trafficking ring, no Epstein, no Maxwell, no nothing. In fact, Pam Bondi had to admit in her filing that there's very little in those summary witness testimonies by law enforcement that the public doesn't already know about. And yet she continues to beat the drum that this case is of great public interest, undercutting Donald Trump's talking point to MAGA. You're on Legal AF. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Let's get into this new filing. Because it's very difficult to keep a lie straight. Isn't that what we're watching? The truth will set them free, but the truth is hard. You have to tell the truth. You have to, but lies, you have to remember them. And then you have to get your factual BS mythology that you're using for political purposes. And when you're getting interviewed on Scottish golf courses, you got to get that straight with what you can really argue pen to paper when you file something in court. Now, let's point out a couple of things about this filing. Pam Bondi's on the cover. Todd Blanche is on the cover. And Jake Clayton is on the cover. There's always a direct link to Donald Trump on the cover. So let's talk about who these people are who just filed this, just to show you that they have, some sort of bona fides to speak for Donald Trump. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, former impeachment lawyer for Donald Trump. Did terribly. He got impeached. Todd Blanche, former criminal defense lawyer for Donald Trump. He batted 500. He was the defense lawyer when Donald Trump got convicted of 34 felony counts related to Stormy Daniels and the election interference case. And he was able to ultimately obtain the immunity decision from the United States Supreme Court. So we call that 50-50. Who's Jake Clayton? Jake Clayton, which is and you're going to love this term, says he's the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He's not the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. At best, he's the acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York because he hasn't been confirmed by the Senate. He had been the U.S. Attorney many, many years ago, and then Donald Trump appointed him to be the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission back in the first administration. He is, how do I put this nicely, a golfing buddy of Donald Trump. Trust me, he's a golfing buddy of Donald Trump. not the brightest tool in the shed. No, sharpest tool in the shed. I may not be the brightest tool in the shed. not the sharpest star in the sky. Is that it? And that's why he's on here with a phony title. But from this administration, you'd expect nothing less. So they file it with this judge. There's two different judges that are looking. Well, there were really three originally, but two different judges that are looking at the grand jury materials issue. One is Judge Engelmeyer, who is presiding over the Maxwell grand jury transcripts. He took over from Judge Nathan because Judge Nathan, after she handled the Maxwell case and sentenced her, got elevated to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Engelmeyer. The other one is Judge Berman, who was the original judge for Epstein, and they both issued similar orders. We need to get to the bottom of the grand jury. We don't understand why you want the grand jury. We want to walk us through the factors, write us a brief, find out if Maxwell, in the Maxwell case, has any objection, kind of get your act together. Another judge down in West Palm Beach about another grand jury involving Epstein, she already rejected the release of the grand jury transcripts, finding nothing under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6, which deals with the release of grand jury material, applied. That was Judge Rosenberg up in West Palm Beach Division. So we put that to a side. Now we got the new filing. And here's what Pam Bondi says as a justification. On page 4, why disclosure is being sought in this particular case. Remember, Donald Trump tells people, there's nothing to see here. This is boring details. Why are you still asking me questions about this? There's nothing to see. He was a creep. He stole young girls from me. All those statements that Donald Trump's been making. So here's what his attorney general says in court. As described above and in the underlying motions, there is undoubtedly a clearly expressed interest from the public in Jeffrey Epstein's and Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes. What's stoking that interest? Donald Trump's failure to be transparent, I would suggest. Beyond that, there is abundant public interest in the investigative work conducted by the Department of Justice and FBI into those crimes. So let's stop right there. She releases a 2-page, unsigned, undated, nobody takes responsibility for it, memo, which kicks this all off at the beginning of July that says that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide, because we looked at the video and we didn't see anything untoward. MAGA conspiracy theorists hated that. And we looked through all the files and there's no client list. And so we're done. They actually thought that would close this out. So yes, we are interested in the Department of Justice and FBI investigation into those crimes. And I find it the height of, I don't want to say hypocrisy, but just galling that they cite as the reason why these files should be released and the people are interested in investigation of a crime. They cite to the Rosenberg trial, where 2 Jewish Americans were convicted of espionage and put to death back in the 1950s for allegedly helping the Russians or the Soviets at the time. I mean, you're bringing up the Rosenbergs to justify your position in the Epstein case. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, and nobody thinks twice about this, between Jay Clayton, the golf buddy, Todd Blanche, and Pam Bondi. Attention given, this is what they say on page 5. So that was page 4. Page 5, attention given to the Epstein and Maxwell cases has recently intensified in the wake of their own memo, July 6th memo announcing the conclusion of the government's review and investigation. No crap. But what really is a revelatory is the fact that they have to admit that there's very little in the grand jury proceedings that the public doesn't already know about. So then they undercut their other argument of transparency. Oh, the Epstein grand jury transcripts will be the Rosetta Stone. We said on Legal AF, that's not the files. The files are the search warrants, and results of the search warrants on laptops, on computers, on safes that were in Jeffrey Epstein's house, from the plane, from the home when they caught Maxwell on the run. All of that. There's also financial transaction reports about money exchange, follow the money between Epstein and the girls that he raped. There's lots of data and information and pictures and audio and video. That's the Epstein files. So they already undercut it because now it's revealed that the grand jury material, at best, is a total in both grand juries, Epstein and Maxwell, of 2 witnesses. One was the same. One was an FBI agent who testified in both. The other was a New York detective who worked on the human trafficking task force, kind of a joint task force with the feds. And he testified in the Epstein along with the FBI. That's it. Summary witnesses at best. Not that unusual. We said there would be nothing in there. No exhibits. Although now the judge is questioning, do you want me to release the exhibits too? Because you better address that as well. Because there were exhibits that were used by these 2 witnesses. Of course, they didn't think that through. The judge thought it through for them, and he issued an order. I'll also post up on Substack, Judge Engelmeyer. And he says the government's application to unseal the grand jury transcripts is pending. And the government's submission, which I just read to you from, suggests, although does not squarely state, that the government is seeking to unseal the exhibits, also the documents that were used. And then he wants full briefing on that by Monday, and I'll report back here about which grand jury exhibits you're proposing and why. Now, in the Maxwell, which is what Judge Engelmeyer is dealing with, Maxwell's alive. So she's also commenting and being given a right to comment. The victims or some of the lawyers representing the victims, I know one of them, Jack Scarola down in Florida, he's okay with the release of the grand jury material. The DOJ, Pam Bondi argument is that most of this victim testimony has already come out, either through suits because they sued Epstein or the estate of Epstein civilly, or in the criminal prosecution of Maxwell. So again, she undercuts the argument of complete transparency because there's effectively nothing in the grand jury, even if we were to get it, grand jury materials, that we haven't already seen, which reinforces, Pam, that's not the Epstein files. You keep trying to redefine them so small that you'll think we won't notice, but we do notice, and we talk about it here on a regular basis on our updates. This one here on Friday morning on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. I talk a lot about the Legal AF Substack, growing. We put lots of critical material there for you to read yourself. This order and the motion or the response by the government, both are there. Now you have my commentary. So until my next hot take, I'm Michael Popok.
I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.